Hi, everyone, and welcome to Practice Growth HQ. Now, look, today we're pulling no punches. The topic for today is stupid mistakes that business owners make. And just in case you're ready to switch off right now, I would put myself in that category of business owners. So, stupid mistakes that business owners make and the skill that you need to avoid that. It sounds like a tough topic, but the reality is, if we can stop ourselves from going backwards in business, then some extra level of forward movement is inevitable, isn't it? And therefore, my guest today, Micah Logan, is the perfect person to talk about that. Now, Micah is an award winning entrepreneur and business coach. He created the BOP framework to help small businesses succeed. Through coaching, speaking, and writing, he empowers entrepreneurs worldwide to achieve success all the way from Boston and the US of A. Welcome, Micah.
Thank you so much, Angus, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, Micah, we like to start with the fast five, quicker questions, quicker answers so people can get to know you quickly. Question one, where did you grow up?
I grew up right here where I live right now, Boston, Massachusetts, born and raised in Beantown, as they call it. I'm not exactly sure why, but maybe it's
Beantown.
something. Yeah, yeah. Not exactly sure why. Maybe it has something to do with old England or something. There's a lot of beans that float around there. We were the first
Okay,
to be colonized, so
there you
who
go.
knows?
I'm aware of the Boston Tea Party. I'd get it if it was called Tea Town, but not Beantown. All right, question two, favorite book besides your own?
One of my favorite books is The E-Myth. Michael Gerber. It is a fundamental piece of business reading. It's a nice structured reading that has good flow, and it helps to bracket your knowledge, whether that's theoretical knowledge from an MBA or even practical knowledge from the experiential learning that you had starting your own company.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's the technician, among other things, the technician turned business owner. And most of our listeners would fall into that category. Absolutely. Question three, what's one of your superpowers?
Listening very carefully.
Okay, that's good. That's something I could do better at, I will admit to you. I probably got a bit better as I've got older. Question four, something you wish your 20-year-old self knew.
There's a quote from the famed historian Thomas Sowell that said, "It takes considerable knowledge to understand the extent of your own ignorance." I wish I asked better questions, got coaches earlier, got mentors, and finally, I wish I had were able to just put that all together, try to pursue knowledge and expand my skill set, and just stack my skills a little earlier.
That's great. Let's repeat that. It takes considerable knowledge to understand the extent of your own ignorance.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the quote. And to me, that just means that you have to ask really good questions. And when I'm talking to my business coaching clients, I often say, if you were given a presentation, if you were at a presentation and the speaker had just finished and they were a world renowned expert on marketing, and you had 10 seconds with that person and you're the second person in line, and you had one thing to ask, what's the one thing that you would ask that person? That's how you can frame to how to think about your best question.
That's good. I like that. And our topic for today is stupid mistakes that business owners make. So we are, in a sense, trying to learn a lot so we can see our own blind spots. Finally, Micah, question five, something you're grateful for.
My family. My wife has been patient over the years. Business is not always linear, stable in one direction.
No.
It looks more like an EEG as opposed to um, a regressive line in economics where it just goes straight up. But she's been very patient. I have two kids, teenagers now, and I enjoy spending time with my whole lot. I really do appreciate the family. It
Yes.
makes it makes working hard in a business worth it.
Yes. Family is a common refrain in answer to the question five. All right, Michael, let's get straight to the task at hand today, which is about stupid mistakes that business owners make, because we don't want to make mistakes. That's the reality. And I believe I'm right in saying that Warren Buffett has a quote about investing, which is basically never lose money. And in a sense, if you never made mistakes, probably a bit more esoteric because, of course, we learn a lot making mistakes. But nevertheless, the idea if we could minimize them and learn other ways, you don't have to learn from your own mistakes after all, then it would see the growth of your business be much more sustainable rather than the, what did you call it? The EEG, the kind of heart
Right.
ECG. Anyway, well, leave it to one of our listeners to set us straight on that. All right, Micah, tell us about these stupid mistakes that business owners make.
So as a business coach, I'm fortunate because I'm industry agnostic. So I am able to actually work with business coaching clients across multiple industries. What that allows me to do is actually see the mistakes that business owners make across industries. And you would think that the mistakes that business owners make is industry specific, but just like the E-Myth writes about the technician and how sometimes the technician thinks that they know how to run a business that they don't actually fundamentally know how to run. Business owners make the same clusters of mistakes. And so what I've done is I've essentially boiled down the clusters of mistakes that business owners make to 6 mistakes, which I call stupid mistakes. And stupid is an acronym that stands for slow to implement, too complicated, unaware of numbers, poor planning, ignoring feedback, and distracted focus. Those to me are the 6 fundamental mistakes that business owners make.
What was number 6? So I've written down the rest. D is for
distracted focus.
Distracted focus. Listeners, I was not distracted. I was just writing it down. All right. Slow to implement, number 1. Tell us about that.
Yes, what gets weighed gets measured. And oftentimes a lot of business owners have invested in some form of education, whether that's time in a consultation or with a coach or reading or just failing, as we mentioned earlier, and learning from that, maybe in an esoteric way or maybe in a more general way. But the reality is that oftentimes these solutions to their problems get just put on the shelf because business owners trade implementing solutions for daily operational functioning. And the problem with that is that because their organization or their business is not structured and organized, it affects their ability to actually implement. And so solutions get put on the shelf, they end up firefighting all day, and then that leads to no implementation at all for solutions that can actually move the needle in their business.
That's a tricky one. I think one of the challenges in business is that there are so many things that you could do at any given moment. And indeed, dare I say, listening to a podcast like this, one of the benefits of that is that you can get that outside perspective. And it may be that the thing that's stopping you from achieving your growth may only be 1 or 2 things. But as Micah says, it's sitting there on the shelf. And I think I reckon that there's a second thought that popped into my head. Not only is it sitting on the shelf on my to-do list, but it also means that if someone else says it to you, you're like, oh, no, we got that covered. It's on the agenda. It's going to happen. And so that's a really interesting one. Yeah, so I reckon we got some of that going on in my company at the moment. There's something that we know we need to do and we've been talking about for months. And it's not that it's not progressing at all. It's just that there are other things happening and it keeps pushing out. So yes, maybe that makes me stupid, listeners. S for slow to implement. T for too complex.
Yeah. So oftentimes business owners, they take simple problems or what they think are complicated problems. Now, granted, if you're in a technical field, obviously in this particular case, you're in a practice, there are complicated issues at times that require complicated solutions, but we're talking about business operations. And oftentimes what I've seen is that business owners take simple operational problems and they make them too complicated. Their solutions are way too complicated. They don't know how to frame the solution in a way that actually solves the issue. They end up not even being able to take that issue that they're dealing with and actually be able to, in some cases, even create a solution for it because they believe that there's something 3 levels deep when really the issue is either them personally because they have hangups that they need to get over, or the issue could be the fact that they're trying to distill 5 or 6 different things, meld it all together into some kind of mosaic solution, and then implement it in their business. And this complicated framework, when you get rid of the clutter of thinking about problems and you think about them in like Elon Musk and first order principles, what's the most important thing I need to do to solve this problem? And then how do I go from there? I've been billing my clients and I don't see that money coming into my bank account, or I notice that my clients are paying late. Okay, if you don't have payments that are being made efficiently and on time, you can't pay payroll, you can't pay your bills, you can't operate, you can't market. So first order principles are something that helps to solve the clutter, the complication and solution delivery.
Too complex. There's a podcast I've listened to for some time, a guy called Craig Groeschel, who Look, he's actually a pastor. He's got I think I'm right in saying the biggest church in the US. That's not what it's the leadership podcast. And so he's leading an organization that's got something like 40 campuses all around the place. And one of the things that he says is about complexity is he says two things. One is he says that organizations don't fall into simplicity. They don't fall into simplicity. As life goes on, as the business grows, the only way you keep things simple is you make a deliberate decision to do it, because in the absence of that deliberate decision, things will get more complex. It's just the way that it goes. The other thing that is a challenge as a business owner, and something I'm constantly thinking about, is it happened last week. Something happened in the company and the team members go, hey, this happened and we need to set up a system so it doesn't happen again. And the question you've got to ask yourself is that really part of a trend, or is that a kind of a one-off thing where we go, you know what, I don't think we need to set up a system that's going to add an extra 5 or 10 minutes to every person's day, every day, when we're talking about an event that happens once a year or whatever the case may be. Thoughts, Micah?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that part of the complicated solutions process is that people don't fundamentally understand what the issue is, because we often tend to make things more complicated because we don't understand, and it becomes this Socratic way of trying to solve a problem, and everyone gets confused. It's very philosophical, and then your staff gets lost because staff ultimately needs policies, direction, and procedures, because that's how they function in their role. But as a leader of your own organization, you need something a little bit more. You need to focus on the understanding behind the reason why you want to implement something, versus just trying to chase this thought process of what are some of the several things that I could possibly do, and then melding them into some kind of weird solution. It's okay to fail when you implement something and to uncomplicate it initially, because you've learned, like we've spoken about before, that's just not how you do it. And I think that so many business owners want to try to step on the stone in the pond without falling in. And so they just put their unshod foot onto that rock to try to not get wet. And then what they don't realize is that it's actually the back of a turtle that scurries away, and they end up falling in anyway. You learn at some point that it's okay to just pursue a course and then the course correct. When that happens, the biggest issue is communication. So communication is faltering if that's the case. In my opinion, business owners need to communicate to their employees, we're going to pursue this course. Very deliberate, very direct, and very communicative. We're going to pursue this course. Here's what we anticipate that is going to happen. If there's a chance that this might happen if it doesn't work out, so look out for that. And then let me know if you start seeing these things, because then we can correct it. And so when you develop that kind of communication ability with your employees, then you do two things. You create a company that values how employees see the business as well. And the second thing you develop when you do that is a feedback loop, which is essential for progressing in business.
In fact, we've got 3 trainees in our organization now. We've never had them before. And it was in some ways quite liberating for me to be able to say to them, look, we've never done this before. We're bringing you guys in. We know where we want to get to. Everyone's clear on that. This is the curriculum and the process that we've developed for you. But look, there might be some things that don't work. Please let us know. And as you say, it just helps us to metaphorically step on the turtle. I love the picture, the imagery of that. All right, now so we're STUPID. I was writing so fast, I can't actually read my own write. What does the U stand for? Is it unavailability of numbers?
Unaware of numbers.
Unaware of numbers. Okay. All right. Tell us about that one.
Just because we have the ability to earn money and to pay bills doesn't make us better at understanding the numbers in the business, because there's a lot more than just gross revenue and expenses paid. It's understanding KPIs that actually move the business and let you know whether or not your initiatives in your business are actually working. How many leads have you gotten this month? How many of those leads, prospects, patients have turned into actually paying patients and referrals? How many of those turn into repeat business? When's the last time that person has come in? what's your follow-up process. Understanding all those metrics helps us to understand if the marketing is working, number one, if we're getting referrals, because if you don't track your referrals, the numbers around your referrals, then how in the world will you know whether or not people are happy with you? If people don't refer you, then they're clearly not happy with your practice. Engaging in a campaign where you understand your numbers and you break down each segment of a patient, let's say patient status, or I call it, I have an ART system that I coach on. It just stands for at-risk triage system, which is, it's a bucket that you can put each stage of prospect in or client, whether the person is a prospective patient, whether a person is a current patient, whether the person is a former patient, and whether that person is a dead lead or cold. You'll never see them again. It's important for us to understand the numbers behind all that stuff. And what I find is that most small business owners are completely unaware of what they have, what the numbers are around that. And they think that they're getting their customers from here, and the customer is really coming from over here. And they may be also unaware of what products or services that their customers are actually buying. And it's so important for us to even understand where the majority of our revenue comes from. Do we have to diversify our services and our products? Do we have to, or should we consider pursuing a product or service extension line to get more people and support our number one product or service purchase? Like, it's so important for small business owners to understand that. And without understanding your numbers, you're not going to be able to track that.
Yeah. Look, I think for many of our listeners, the product elements are fairly finite. It depends a bit. If you're a physiotherapist, you've got an initial consult, you've got ongoing consults. Occasionally, physios, for example, the practice that I go to, and indeed we've had the principal on the podcast previously, they had some additional products. Like I could do, I believe it's called video gait analysis. I could run on a treadmill and they could show me videos. So that was an extra product. If you're a doctor, certainly in Australia, in a Medicare context, it's really mainly the length of the appointment. That's the deal. Dentists have got a lot of different products, no doubt about that. So it does vary a bit for our listeners, let's put it that way. But I think if you've got more products, then certainly going and checking to see where your revenue is coming from is really important. The other part, which is just something you've got to keep an eye on, is like, what is the products that you're using to bring people into the business? And then, because I dare I say, a gateway drug. It's what's that thing that you bring them in on, and then you go, oh, by the way, are you aware about this other thing? That was certainly the case with me with the physio. I think in relation to numbers, the other one is just, of course, the dollars in relation to your business. And Micah, in my mind, at the bottom of the pile is what they call bank balance accounting, which is there money in my account today? Yes. Okay. It's a good day. Tomorrow, no, it's a bad day. That's at the bottom of the pile. We've got to be better than that, listeners. We've certainly had people on the podcast talking about the profit first system, which I think is a great way. And certainly the allocation of funds, sweeping off your own pay, your own profits, but also sweeping off your tax liabilities and other things as well. All right.
Yeah, we coach profit first. And I just want to add one thing, that there is a reason why you'll notice a lot of COOs of healthcare facilities across the spectrum. It doesn't matter which one. I will tell you that they spend an inordinate amount of money, and you already know this, on the metrics behind patient care, patient satisfaction, those surveys, those reviews, those follow-ups. What does that look like? And so, although it may not be specific product-based KPIs because of this, it certainly is patient satisfaction, care, and how they felt like their experience has gone. Experiential metrics that they use to track those visits are really important for the healthcare segment.
Yeah, particularly in a space of increasing competition. That's the reality in Australia. That's the reality in the US. All right, we are on to P in our stupid acronym, and that's P for poor planning.
Poor planning. It is almost a universal that I speak to business owners and they don't know what revenue is coming in the next quarter and from who. It hasn't been tracked. There's no marketing plan, no financial management cash flow plan. There's no employee plan. There's no marketing plan. There's no strategic growth plan. There's no development of staff plan and training. There are so many holes that are missing in the planning process. In fact, what I find is that most business owners get into business almost like a canoe, but then they get out in the middle of the pond and then they try to figure out, how do I get back to shore? And can I just step out the boat? Because, okay, you opened this business, but what did you expect was going to happen
Yeah.
in the next 5 years? We
Yeah.
we think about entry, we don't think about exit all the time. It's like having a one-way trip out into space with no thoughts about how you're going to deal with reentry when you get out there. No heat shields, nothing like that.
You're
Just as important.
you're a man of great analogies, Micah, especially for an audio audience. Yes, I think we can all imagine do we sail paddling off in our canoe and ending up in the middle of the river and realizing we've come a cropper. I must admit, in my organization, we've got a quarterly planning where we'll go off site for a day. Listeners, some of you would be doing something like that, and maybe you've got to grab your top people and do that. It can be tricky, especially in healthcare. It's every hour that the business is not open, that's lost revenue. And yet it sometimes can be, what do they say, penny pound foolish. I'm mucking the expression. Basically, don't save your pennies and kill your pounds, as it were. And I'm looking at your list. So are we planning for cash flow? Have we got a marketing plan? What's our employee plan? What's our growth plan? What's our staff development plan? With my executive team, we spend a full day doing that. And I'm pleased to say we get a tick against most of those boxes, Micah, but there's one there that we don't. Anyway, listeners, I think that's definitely something you've got to look at. And may I say, sometimes just start. You don't need to shut down the entire practice for a day and do this. It may be that you get together with your top 2 or 3 people and just once have a meeting for an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is, just to go, hey, here's some things we should focus on and let's come up with a plan. I am conscious we're running out of time a little bit, Micah, so let's move our way to I for ignoring feedback.
Yep. This kind of goes with the poor planning here. It's something that happens all the time. People give you feedback, whether it's employees and they do it indirectly with maybe a snide comment, or they do it when they have their exit interview. And customers will always, they are not shy about giving you feedback. And with so many ways for patients and customers to review practices now, ignoring feedback is a death knell. And I just had a consultation with a prospective business coaching client, and the number one consistent thing in the reviews that were written about this person's business was him.
And
it wasn't great. And so the thing is that when you ignore feedback, you're going to get those continual reviews that target one aspect of your business, and without you changing the narrative. You don't want the people to shape your narrative in public. You want to shape your narrative to the people who are coming in. The only way to do that is by taking feedback and making changes.
Without throwing this individual under the bus, what was the nature of the feedback about them?
Oh, I don't mind. He's a jerk. That's what they said.
Great business, but the owner's a jerk.
The product was great, but the person's a jerk. It's what do you do with that? It's obviously he doesn't understand that the problem is actually him, and that he needs to engage more in customer service. But on the other side of that, if we were to break it down maybe a little bit more, we would say that part of the reason why he actually expresses himself that way in the business is probably because he's overworked, no planning.
Yeah.
He's making these stupid mistakes, and that is causing anxiety every time he has to interact with someone who would buy a service.
Yeah, let me stick my future telling hat on. I would say in healthcare that if there's criticism about the healthcare professional, it tends to be that they're what we would call their bedside manner. And this is, on the one hand, it's like you get into healthcare and there's so much information you've got to take in. And let's face it, the stakes are high. I don't know. Maybe if you're a podiatrist or a physio, it's not life or death necessarily, but obviously can have a severe impact. But certainly for doctors, it literally is life or death. And indeed, even dentists are dealing with oral cancers and stuff like that. So that must be your primary focus. But the big problem in the healthcare space is that you are dealing in a space that your patients don't entirely understand. And so when they're trying to figure out how to assess your performance, quote unquote, they can't really assess you on the medical side. They can sometimes, but it's how did you make me feel? And the kind of 1980s model of healthcare, come out to the reception area, next, Pryor, this kind of thing. It's hello. Whereas if you can make people feel that they're special and then deliver great healthcare, then that's the risk, that feedback that you otherwise not going to see, which was Dr. Bloggs was a great doctor, but he's a jerk.
it's just gonna say quickly that it's definitely the interaction differential. This doctor is seeing the same case across multiple different patients thousands of times, but each individual person is a one of one, so they don't understand. They've done their own research. They've tried homeopathic stuff that doesn't really work, and the doctor has talked a million times about why you shouldn't use maybe potty herbs to try to mitigate high blood pressure at this late stage when you're 220 over 115. And so
Right.
it's an exhausting conversation.
What about ignoring feedback from the team? As you said, Micah, this can show up as a kind of a snide remark, but what can the listeners do to be a bit more proactive about that?
You have to create feedback loops. So space for feedback to actually come in, for you to become unemotional about the feedback that comes in. And I get it. If you're the one who has the debt and put the money down on the practice, you don't want to hear things that might take you under. But it's ironic that those are the things that you need to hear in order to get better and stay in business. But creating opportunities for feedback loops through customers immediately after their experience, they should have the team members live speak to the patients and say, how was your appointment? Is there anything that we could do better to help you out to make your experience more comfortable? And in the same way, practice providers should allow opportunities for their employees to give them feedback about what it's like to work there, to interact with patients, and to interact with the doctor staff as well. Because oftentimes the employees and the customers, both stakeholders, feel the same way about how the doctors are interacting with them. If a doctor thinks that a front desk person is an idiot, it's likely that they're coming off like that in their behavior subtly to that person who's asking them questions and who's made mistakes training. It doesn't make them smarter, but it makes them as a poor coach. You need to coach your staff to perform exactly how you want them to perform, and they will, but you have to coach. Coaching is part of being a business owner.
I have to say, in relation to this one, listeners, I'm going to make a confession on this podcast. Early days in my business, if I'm really honest with you, I was basically scared to ask my clients for feedback. And I had this epiphany. I know that this would be some kind of mindset thing. Oh, if I ask them, they're going to go, oh, that's right. Actually, Angus's business is not very good. Therefore, I'm going to get rid of them. It's ridiculous thinking, but that's what can happen. And then I had this epiphany, which is they already have an opinion whether I ask them or not. And the one difference is if you ask them, you can do something about it. And so we are a lot more deliberate at asking our clients for feedback. And sometimes it's tough. You get feedback and you're like, oh my goodness, what you're describing, your experience to me is the exact opposite of the experience we're trying to create. But then you get to go back to the drawing board and fix it. But the one area that I would say do not neglect is the feedback from your team. And that is a delicate balance. Because on the one hand, you cannot have an entirely socialist organization where it's no leader and we just do what the consensus is, because the consensus will lead you down an extremely mediocre path. That's just reality. I'm not poo-pooing your team members. That's just, you've got to be a leader. But on the other hand, you need mechanisms to get that feedback. We've got a couple of things that we do, Micah. Both I learned from other people. The first is that the entire organization goes through something called Friday feedback, where they've got to fill in a 10-minute survey every Friday. And it asks them, it's a bunch of self-reflection questions, and then also things that we could do to help them better and steps that the organization could take. It even says, and you might think this is a bit tough, it says who's doing a really good job in the organization at the moment and who's not doing a good job. And I can tell you as the business owner, sometimes it's hard to know when someone's not performing. So that's been really helpful. And then the other thing that we do is every team meeting, we measure our values together. We've got a system that Toyota developed. And I find in terms of keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the team, that is invaluable. All right.
Yeah, I like that.
That leads us to D for distracted focus. We're finally at the end of stupid, and we don't want to be stupid, do we? Distracted focus. That one seems reasonably obvious, but tell us about that.
Sure. It's exactly what you think it is, that oftentimes if business owners are pursuing multiple different ideas and pursuits for the sake of their operation. So it's the reverse of some of the other stuff we talked about, ignoring feedback, slow to implement. Those are operational things. This one is like the exact reverse, where a person is living in their head so much. Oh, I want to do this. I think that my practice, for instance, I think that my physical therapy practice should also encompass personal training and massage and the juice bar. I think that my medical practice I am I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon. I think I want to also add selling back braces and walkers and canes
Right,
and
right.
medical equipment that help you with recovery. Okay, fair enough. These ideas sometimes can distract from the actual delivery of the mechanism that you're there to actually deliver, especially if your operations is not highly efficient at the beginning. So I think what distracted focus does is it prevents you from being a revenue optimal, and it confines you to this world of possibilities of what your business permanently could be, but not what it actually is. And so that the rest of stupid kind of brings that back down into focus.
Mm.
If you follow the S all the way from the S to the I, then it will help you prevent the D in distracted focus.
Let me ask you this, because this is a real issue for the listeners. We've got S, which is slow to implement. We spoke about that at the beginning. That's where there's something you need to do, but you haven't done it. And then at the other end of the scale, we've got distracted focus, which is too many choices. Hey, you need to make the main thing the main thing. I would say for most listeners, if you're a practitioner, your highest value time is usually being a practitioner. That's your $100, $200, $500 an hour activities. Sometimes you can have a $500 or $1,000 an hour activity when you sit back and look at the business and make a bit of a strategic shift. But Micah, on the one hand, you want me to be singularly focused. On the other hand, you don't want me to be slow to implement. Which one do I do? Have you got some kind of litmus test for me to use to decide that?
Yeah. Are you, I do. Are you 80% optimally revenue optimized in your business? If you're 80% revenue optimized, then you can pursue your next idea. Meaning, when you did your business plan, you said that the potential of my business is to generate $10 million a year.
Yeah.
Are you generating 8? Once you start generating 8, then you can start generating ideas to go from 8 to 12 or 15, right? If you're 80% revenue optimizing your business and all of your team members, whoever they are, what position, are actually performing at least 70% functionally in their role. Let's say that you have a practice with multiple doctors and they booked 70% of whatever schedule you agreed on before you decide to hire another one or before you decide to pursue another idea. Those are some of the metrics that we use as KPIs to understand operational efficiency and whether or not we are maximizing the value per operating hour value in the business. Am I 80% to my stated revenue goal? Is my team working 70% to their individual capacity, whether they're part-time or full-time? Because you do want each individual team member, whether they're full-time or part-time, to generate. For part-timers, we say at least a minimum of 50 to 75,000 per employee. Full-timers, you want them generating between 100 and 200,000. And of course, that all just depends on what kind of practice or vertical you're in, and what kind of business you're in, of course. And those can adjust based off of what exactly the focus is. But that the percentage works a little bit better because that is like more of a utilization metric. So if your doctors are not being utilized at least 70% to their part-time or full-time schedule, then that's going to be a problem. And if your business is not utilizing its operation to 80% of its potential revenue, then that certainly is a problem. You have a leak somewhere or a bottleneck somewhere that hasn't been fixed.
Okay, that's a good rule of thumb. So if you're not at either of those metrics, then that's the main thing. Don't be worried about shiny objects. Let's just get those. Let's get those fundamentals in place. If you're above that 80% revenue optimized, 70% to capacity, then you can say, all right, what is this other thing I can potentially do? Yeah, I've seen some interesting things over the years. I'll never forget a dentist who I thought had a very good practice. And I can only assume maybe they were getting a bit bored. And they had this big machine that you could climb into with just your head out the top, which was basically this fat burning kind of weight loss thing. And I just thought, wowza, like one would imagine they would have invested 5 years in becoming a dentist and plus countless hours of other study, which doing the right procedures could be $500 an hour. But for whatever reason, they wanted this kind of fat burning machine. I'm not saying it didn't work. I don't know, but it struck me as an unusual combo.
I get this vision of the 1950s and like the leather belt machine that kind of wiggles you while they're trying to do a dental cleaning at the same time.
Yeah. It wasn't that. But anyway, listeners, keep the main thing. Well, Micah, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I think your stupid acronym is a great one. And certainly as business owners, we don't want to make stupid mistakes. If people want to find out more or get in touch with you, what should they do?
Yeah, they should go to my website, Micah-Logan.com. Micah spelled Micah-Logan.com, and they can get some resources if they want. They can certainly send me a message and schedule a time to talk to me. And I am also on like Instagram, Micah Logan 1 there. But the primary way to get in touch with me, the best way optimally, is the website, and send me an email or message.
That's great. Micah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I had a great time. Thank
Yeah,
you for
me
having
too.
me.
Me too. All right, everyone. We've covered a lot there, haven't we? 6 mistakes that business owners make that adds up to stupid. And as I say every week, it's not knowledge that's power, it's applied knowledge that's power. And the question is, what is the one thing you can do as a result of what you'd heard today? Make sure you go and do that before you go on to the next thing. Finally, if you got some value from today, I'd really appreciate if you head to where you heard this show and to leave us a lovely review to give us the encouragement to bring you more great content every week on Practice Growth HQ.